What's up, guys? Hi guys, it's me, Dr. B. Well, today I just kind of wanted to do my October and November wrap up. I just wanted to recap all the books that I read in October and November. Also, if you hear like a bunch of birds in the background, for some reason at this time of the day, there's just like a bunch of crows that like to just like gather right outside my place. Anyways, so I started off the month reading The Chain by Adrienne McKinty. This was a super interesting book. I was like really hooked. I actually gave this book 4 stars. Basically the whole premise is that you're part of the chain. Like once your child gets kidnapped, you then have to kidnap another child to be released from, you're not like necessarily released from the chain, but if you follow the orders, you get your child back. And so it follows like one woman and her journey to basically kidnap another kid to get her kid back. Yeah, super like thriller, page turner. I was like super hooked throughout. Then I switched things up and read a couple of like romance or erotic novellas. So I read Pumpkin Spice and Not So Nice by Becky Monson. And that book I gave 3 stars. I thought that it was a cute fall read. It was less than 250 pages. It was nice to read during like the beginning of October when it was like spooky season was approaching and I was getting really excited for fall. I also read Trick and Treat. So these are 2 different novellas, both by Shay Sanders. So I gave Trick 3 stars. I said that it was slightly steamy, and I would say it's kind of like, you know, you steamed up the shower a little bit, but wasn't like super duper spicy. But Treat, the other book, was a very spicy standalone novella that I thought was better than Trick. And I actually gave Treat 3.75 stars, but I kind of rounded up on Goodreads to 4. Then I read The Librarian Spy, and I'll just say that it wasn't for me. It was like more historical fiction. It was basically like this librarian ended up being a spy during World War II, and I was really lost throughout the whole thing, and I just was kind of bored reading it. I just think it wasn't for me. Like, no hate to the book, but I did give it 2 stars. I also read I Kissed Shara Wheeler, and I'm not gonna lie, every time I passed by this book in Target, I thought it said I Kissed Sarah Wheeler. My brain apparently just never saw the H there, but it's Shara Wheeler. So I listened to the audiobook while I read this book. And I give the book 3.5 stars. It was kind of like a bunch of LGBTQI+ characters who were, they attended a religious school, and Shara Wheeler kisses like a couple of different people. And the main female character is essentially trying to figure out what happened to Shara Wheeler because she goes like missing. And it's like, you know, it counts down from, 20 days till graduation, 18, 16, etc. And basically the main character, Chloe, is trying to figure out what happened to Shara, and she's like in super competition with this person for valedictorian. She ends up kind of like, I guess they kind of like share their feelings for each other by the end of the story. But it was a good YA read. Then I read Bunny. And I gave Bunny 4 stars, but I just feel like Bunny just doesn't have any words. Like I don't have any words for Bunny. Like I felt like I had no idea what was going on, and this is kind of like how everybody else feels too, at least reviews that I've heard from other people. They just feel like they're on an acid trip. And I was like, am I reading this book? Like, do I not understand things? And I went to go look up some information on Reddit later and kind of found out that there was some interesting things going on where it was kind of maybe detailing the maybe some sort of psychotic episode, like she might have actually had schizophrenia or something like that. And I was like, oh, that kind of actually makes a lot more sense. And so like just kind of putting my psychologist brain spin on it, I was like, makes a little bit more sense. Feel validated that it wasn't just me not understanding the story. But I was just very curious throughout the whole story about like what was going on, and that alone kept me wanting to read it. Somewhere in the middle of the month, I had a trip to Massachusetts to go see my family because my aunt is actually pregnant with twin girls, and I was gonna see my grandma as well. And my grandma and I had planned on watching Where the Crawdads Sing, so I was like, I have to read the book before I go. I don't want to go watch this movie and like know there's a book out there. So I read the book within like a couple of days, and this might actually be one of my favorite books of the year. I gave it 5 stars, and the movie was pretty spot on with the book. There were just a few like details that weren't spot on. I'm from North Carolina, and so this story was like really interesting just to kind of learn, just to kind of follow along this girl who lives in the marsh in North Carolina. It was kind of funny because I was like, I don't talk like that, and I'm from North Carolina. But if I recall, I believe the girl from the book, they had like roots in New Orleans and stuff like that, so they had more of that Louisiana twang versus like a North Carolina accent. But I really liked this. It wasn't really like historical fiction, but there was like this mystery component. There was a little bit of romance. I just really, really enjoyed it. And then Sarah Caroli kept talking about this book called Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney, and I was like, okay, I have to read that. And I read it, and I thought it was a good book with like really unexpected plot twists. I gave it 4 stars. And this book, everybody keeps talking about how at the beginning the husband, so it's like a husband and wife, they went a trip to like this, I think it's a church, if I'm honest, they like, which is really weird. They end up staying in like a church or an old church that got converted or something like that. And it's like really snowy, wintry outside. But the man has, or the husband has prosopagnosia, which that's like, I read the word and I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, it's really cool when psychology and specifically neuropsychology enters books, because that's my field of psychology that I studied. So it's basically where people have an inability to recognize faces. And so just kind of, I mean, Alice Feeney did a good job explaining prosopagnosia and just talking about how he couldn't distinguish the faces. Like, so he wouldn't know his wife from some other person, but he can distinguish based on like their scent or their touch or their voice or whatever. But it was a good, you know, mystery thriller that I ended up giving 4 stars. Then I read The 2 Lives of Lydia Bird by Josie Silver. And that kind of, it fell somewhere between like 3.25 and 3.5 stars for me. It was really just a lot about like grief and loss. The main female character had lost her partner, and it just kind of shifted between these periods of when she was asleep. Her name was Lydia. She was asleep and when she was awake, but like she was kind of living this imaginary life in her sleep. So really just having a hard time letting go of her husband or fiance or whatever he was to her. But in the end, she eventually, you won't spoil it. Then I listened to I'm Glad My Mom Died on audiobook, and I gave this 4.5 stars. I really, really liked this book. For like, I'm not a huge nonfiction person, but I really liked this book because I watched iCarly growing up, and Jeanette McCurdy played Carly's best friend Sam on the show. And it was just really interesting because like as a kid I had no idea what was going on with Jeanette McCurdy. Like she just showed up, did her thing, and like Nickelodeon portrayed this like funny, you know, delinquent kind of sidekick character. But like here, you know, Jeanette is like really struggling with a lot of different mental health issues, and I think it was really important that she shared her story and just like letting people know like this wasn't okay, and like what Nickelodeon did to her wasn't okay. So I really enjoyed her book, and I'm glad that she had the courage to, you know, write that book and really talk about her experiences and share it with the world, because it's really hard to put yourself out there. Then around this time, Colleen Hoover was kind of taking the world by storm yet again. So I read It Starts With Us, and I gave that book 4 stars. When I was reading this book, I probably have an unpopular opinion, but I felt like really like lovey-dovey feelings, and I was really happy to get to see like Lily and Atlas together. Of course, like Ryle would make his appearances, and I'd be like, oh, Ryle. But it wasn't like, oh my god, I hated this book. This wasn't what I wanted it to be. Like, Colleen did a terrible job. I thought thought you did a great job, okay? So like, I'm sorry if I have an unpopular opinion, but like, that's just my opinion. I really enjoyed the book. I liked hearing about their story, and I really loved the little kids. I don't know if they were little, but they were like 10 years old or whatever. But I thought they really added to the story, and there was humor, and I just felt good reading the book. Then I picked up probably like my first fantasy in ever? I don't know. I know I read like Harry Potter when I was younger. I didn't read all of them, so I'm trying to read them all at some point. But as an adult, I think this might have been like my first fantasy book. So I read Shadow and Bone. I freaking loved it. So Shadow and Bone is by Leigh Bardugo. It's the first book in the Shadow and Bone series. I gave this 4 stars, but really it just kind of follows Alina and her story. She's essentially like learning that she has powers, and I think there's supposed to be like a romance kind of coming. There's a lot of world building, which I didn't mind. But I found myself like, this book was really easy to read, and I read it pretty quickly. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I listened to Dating Dr. Dill by Nisha Sharma, and I had no idea what this book was about, but it was really funny. I like found myself laughing throughout and learning a little bit about like Indian culture and stuff like that. But I just thought it was a really good book. I gave it 4 stars. Just kind of details like what it's like living in your 30s as an Indian woman. Well, and there was a man as well, but an Indian couple who, it's like enemies to lovers kind of trope, but their families are like, when are you gonna get married? And there's all these like contingencies upon getting married. It just kind of like talks about like their story, and you know, if they end up together, or like what happens, and like one of them's a doctor, so Dr. Dill, just kind of like their journey to potentially finding love. And the last book that I read in October was actually an ARC that I got off of Book Sirens, which is just a place where you can get a lot of ARCs. And it's really exciting because like the more that you read, the more that you're able to check out at once. So like in the beginning, you can only read 1 ARC. An ARC is an advanced reader copy, by the way. But in the beginning, you can only like read 1 ARC, and then you have to review it before you can get another one. Now I'm at the point where I believe I can like get 3 at a time, and then like if I finish one, I can have one on like hold or waiting for me or whatever. But I read Chaos in My Wake by A.V. Schenner. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but holy crap. This book is a psychological thriller, and it was a psychological thriller. So it just like, I mean, all you really know is like there's this character, his name is Matt, I believe. But Matt is like in some debt, and he has to do like all this crazy stuff to get out of debt. But just like really details like his journey of like how he's gonna get out of debt and all the people that he encounters along this journey. It's almost like he's a good guy that just like gets wound up in all this bad stuff, and how does he get out of it, right? Like he owes $100,000, and like he was really trying to just like save his father's business, but then like got mixed up in all this crap, and then yeah, he's just in a load of poop. So I gave that book 4 stars. Then in November, I read His and Hers by Alice Feeney, and I thought it was very surprising at the end with just an interesting motive. It just had like, it switched back and forth between his and her perspective, and then the murderer, which in the book, it doesn't say it's the murderer, but on the audiobook, it does say the chapter labeled as the murderer. So I thought it was an all right mystery thriller, and I gave it 3 stars. Then I also read and listened to at the same time Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. And this was a really good book. It was like about racism and kind of getting like revenge for these 2 fathers. Like the fathers had sons, and the sons were in a relationship together. So the fathers weren't together, but their sons were together. Okay, so like so it kind of just talked about, one was black, one was white, so interracial relationships. There was some racism going on, homophobia going on. So it really just talked about all these different things, and how these fathers were kind of coming to terms with their sons being gay, or like being gay and black, and like, you know, just really trying to get revenge for whoever killed the sons. So overall, I thought it was a good book. I ended up giving it 3 stars. Then I read Addicted to You by Krista and Becca Ritchie, and I really liked this book for being a first book in a series. It's gonna be a long series, but basically it just talks about Lily and Lo, which is short for, I guess, Lauren. Lauren, I don't know if you want to say it like that, but Lily and Lo, and they both have addictions. Lily's addicted to sex, Lo is addicted to alcohol, and just their tumultuous relationship, which kind of leads them to, you know, how can we be in a relationship together and deal with our addictions. So it's just really interesting to think about from like a psychologist perspective, and like just really wanted them to get help. So overall, I gave this book 3 stars. Then I'm just looking at my ratings and I'm like, wait, I have a lot of 3 stars. But then I listened to and read White Smoke by Tiffany Jackson. So this book was really interesting. It was a YA horror, kind of like some paranormal elements to it, but I thought it was okay. I felt like there were some things that were left unresolved, but overall, I thought it was a pretty decent YA horror, so I ended up giving it 3 stars. Then I read and listened to Beartown, which is the first book in the Beartown series. So Beartown, I gave 4.5 stars. It was really good. It dealt with the R word, 4-letter word that starts with R. But basically how like in our culture, the R word culture, that people end up taking the guy's side and like saying the girl's like making it up, like maybe she was, you know, in love with this person and then he didn't reciprocate feelings, so she's making up that he forced himself upon her. But it's all around like this hockey town called Beartown. So it really just kind of details their stories and the politics of being on this hockey team in this town. But it was really good. I've heard Frederick Bachman is a really good writer, and this was my first book by him, and it did not disappoint. So I have the other books in his series, Us Against You and The Winners, which are books 2 and 3 of Beartown, on hold through my library. So when I get those, I will read them. And then I read another couple of arcs through Book Sirens. So I read The Mistletoe Problem. I only gave this 3 stars. It was a cute little romance that just kind of was sort of like small town romance, enemies to lovers kind of thing. But basically just the one issue I had with it was like this girl, Elle is her name. She was trying to make a lot of decisions. It's kind of like insta-love in a way, but like she was trying to make all these decisions and was trying to be respectful of like, I don't want to stay here because I just fell in love with this dude. And then making all these life choices. Like she's very kind of iffy and like can't make decisions on her own. And so like I'm not a huge fan of women who are like that, and it's okay if you're like that, but just like be aware, I guess, and like be independent and try to make your own decisions, not dependent on somebody else. I get it, like you want to fall in love, and like love is very powerful, but like don't put your dreams on hold for somebody else. Like take chances, do your thing, go explore the world, especially when you're young, and then settle down. And then I read Santa's Secret Hookup by Braun Wild. Gave this 3 stars. It was good smut, but it was really short. They even said it wasn't a complete book, but it just didn't have a lot of character development. So it was like I guess it was more like a novella, maybe like a sneak peek of some sort, but the smut was good. I thought it was really interesting. Basically like 2 characters, one's the boss, and every year they like meet up kind of secretly or privately and have sex at like their party, but like private, like in a private area. And so like finally I think the girl is like, this is my last year working here, and like he's like, well, what do we do after this kind of thing. So it's more like, do we start a relationship? Then I read The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, and I really like reading his books. I find most of his mysteries and thrillers to be like 4 stars. I think the first one I ever read by him was Final Girls, but I really like his writing style, but this one definitely kept me engaged. I listened to the book while I read along, and I plowed through it in a matter of a couple days. I like picked it up and in October and then like put it down because I just got really busy and other books took like my interest. But I picked it up, and when I did pick it up, it was like a matter of a couple days and I finished it. But definitely had several plot twists. Some were totally expected and some were unexpected, but overall, I thought it was a pretty decent mystery thriller. If you have not heard about this book, Black Girls Must Die Exhausted, I think you need to go read it. So this was a really good book. I gave it 4 stars. It details the life of Tabitha Walker and what it's like to be a Black woman. But it also has some other Black characters in it as well, and they talk about like their experience and, you know, how hard it is to be Black in America, and how like you have to try twice as hard or 2 times as hard as like your white counterpart to basically like succeed, or like sometimes just because you're Black, getting parts because it like fits the company quota, or like they want to use your perspective because you're Black and not necessarily because of your skills. It's like based on color and things like that. And so she's just kind of talking about all these different things of like, why is it so hard to be Black, and like Black girls must die exhausted because they're trying so hard to just prove themselves, when why do they need to do that? Jane Allen, who is the author of this book, that's actually a pen name, so I guess her real name is Janique Seeley. She has another book called Black Girls Must Be Magic. I'm really excited to read that. I have to figure out when I'm gonna get that. I've bought a lot of books recently, so I'm like a little bit broke. And the last book that I've read in November is another arc called Savage Indulgent, which I keep bouncing between 4 and 5 stars, probably like 4.5 stars for me. But it is a cannibal horror. So essentially it's like this woman invites people over for a party, and then how she is going to essentially eat them later. But there's all these like funny things that keep happening. I mean, they're not funny, but it's just like, oh my gosh, really? Like this happened? So like, for example, there's one person who is not like, who ends up not being drugged and it ends up being at the party, and she's like, oh my gosh, like why are there these people on the floor? Like what happened? And she's like, oh, like they took some drugs. Like she had to make up something on the fly. But it was a pretty interesting book, and at the end there's like a little twist in the like epilogue, I guess, but it was pretty interesting. This book's by Shayla Raquel. I started following her on Instagram, but you should go follow her if you don't. So that's all the books that I read in October and November, and I am actually kind of trying to put together like a little TBR for my December reading. I am participating in the Reindeer Readathon with Break Even Books. Starts December 1st, goes through December 31st. If you like this video, make sure that you like, comment, subscribe. Let me know down in the comments if you're going to be participating in a December challenge of some sort, or if you're going to be doing the Reindeer Readathon. Bye guys!